want to contrast Indic modernity with Western modernity because it's very important to break the monopoly of modernity with Westernization. Those two things are not the same. And I want to bring that separation out. If you look at the philosophical found, so the first line of difference is change with continuity in the Indic sense and transformational change. The other aspect of it is Western modernity is influenced by Enlightenment. It emphasizes on reason, individualism, secularism. Indic modernity is rooted on Indic thought, inclusivity, harmony, nature. I've mentioned that. And view of the individual in Western modernity is based on individual rights. The individual is the central fulcrum, and everything else is secondary to the individual. Indic modernity is a balance of individuality in a collective framework. Both are important. I want to emphasize this. The collective is not more important than the individual. Both are equally important. And it sees individuals as a part of a larger whole. Uh, Spirituality and religion, it often, Western modernity looks at secularization, the separation of church and state. Indic modernity looks at diverse spiritual traditions. It looks at everything as being interconnected. Western modernity's approach to knowledge and science is based on empirical observation and scientific entity does give importance to empirical observation, but it also looks at inner wisdom and spiritual insight. It looks at patterns. It acknowledges the importance of intuition and experiential knowledge. I think one thinker that people should look into further on, who talks a lot on this subject, is Professor Gautam Desiraju. He talks about how intuition and experiential knowledge is important, and he's given an example of Maslow, who built the not Maslow, Mendeleev, who gave the periodic table. It's a very interesting example he gives, because Mendeleev actually was able to do that through intuition. Anyways, going ahead, view of nature. It Western modernity looks at this world as a way to just, it has a very utilitarian view of nature. Just exploit the resources, pursue scientific thought endlessly without any control, without looking at how we are polluting the environment, without looking at what are the ramifications to human society going forward, because your focus is just on the here and now. Indic modernity would look at scientific progress, yes, but it also looks at the sacredness of the natural world and how to maintain harmony with nature via sustainable practices. In terms of values and ethics, Western modernity prioritizes material success and individual rights. Indic modernity looks at compassion, spiritual growth, a sense of duty. Values ahimsa not of the endless kind, but Krishna's version of ahimsa. The non-aggression principle, that you look at not engaging in violence, but of course, as a sense of, if you have to retaliate in the advent of any aggression, of course you have to respond. And Mahabharata is the example of that. Approach to social justice, focusing on legal and political frameworks. Western modernity looks at oppressor, oppressed, social inequalities. It looks at welfare and affirmative action programs. Indic modernity looks at a more holistic approach, integrating spiritual and ethical values. And it also looks at selfless service, community empowerment, and it is open to welfare, but in the sense that how does that welfare lead to value creation? What can you give so that once you have done that charity, maybe that person can then do something to give back to society? How you can improve the lives of people. So I wouldn't just think of it as handouts. And then cultural diversity, which is acknowledging cultural diversity and promoting. Western modernity looks at it from the point of view of acknowledging that diversity, but it does not promote genuine inclusivity. It does not really, different people from different cultures but talking the same thing. They are not really, they look diverse, but their ideas are one. They are linear. Indic modernity actually looks at different ideas. You have this view of this Jain thought of Anekantvad, these seven blind men who are touching different parts of the elephant. There is one elephant, but they all experience that elephant in different ways. So they describe it in different ways. So there is an acknowledgement of that one truth, but there is space for people to experience and visualize it in different ways. And this is the part that is actually my recommendation for actionables. And this is the thing that I really, really am very passionate about, which is firstly, I think there is a lot of genuine merit in sampradayas, and I think they have a key role to play in organizing society because they are the last mile connectors in the religious sense, and I think they have a much bigger role to play in keeping society together, in keeping traditions alive. I think that the second point is dharmically run nanny services, sponsored and trained by temples, intuitive and not prescriptive imparting of values. So a nursery or a daycare, and because this is an acknowledgement of the challenge we face in the modern world, that nuclear families now are becoming increasingly the norm. And when they are becoming the norm, and when women are also going to the workplace, and rightfully so, when parents don't have time for their children, how do we maintain that connect with tradition? How do we keep dharmic literacy to the younger generation, to the newer generation, so that the chain doesn't get broken? And I think once temples are freed, uh, uh, dharmically trained nannies who are trained at the temple, and then through very, very non-invasive and through fun activities, in a very experiential form, they provide dharmic literacy. They teach shlokas. They teach the importance of family, of tradition. Uh, so yeah, it gives importance to the family, but it also there are two aspects to it. One is, of course, grandparents are an important part as well, but there is an acknowledgement that we will not have those large families going forward. And even if you see in terms of fertility rates, there are fewer and fewer children. You will almost see that except for 3 or 4 states now, all the other states in India have replacement or sub replacement level fertility rates. So it's a family of two or maybe one. And there is a problem of the missing grandparent. So that problem is solved by the arrival of a nanny. And that nanny is the one who provides the training, especially the foundational training at a younger age. And then you can have children going to Bal Vihar, like, Chinmaya Vision runs that, and maybe going there during holidays. You can conduct hikes to spiritual destinations. Travel and Tirth Yatra, combines and comes into one. So through these fun activities, I think there is an institution called Draupadi. I'm forgetting the name, Draupadi Institute or something like that. And I think one of the people there has spoken in Sangam Talks as well. I think they organize spiritual, like those trails in many of these places in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata itihasas. A lot of these historical places which exist even today. Uh, One very interesting place is actually the original Red Fort or the Lal Kot, which is not the Mughal Red Fort, which is basically a place called in Indraprasth, which was the ancient site of the Mahabharata. There is actually a place called Lal Kot, which was the original Red Fort. I mean, places like these which people don't know, and you build this whole spiritual religious experience in conjugation with activities that people are doing today. And a friend of mine gave me this example that you could have these infrared goggles. uh, how do I say it? A lot of our historical sites have been demolished, and many of these places have broken down. The maintenance and preservation of them is a huge challenge, and we don't have we don't fully have that opportunity because Archaeological Survey of India is underfunded as well, that we can build everything back today. Many of those structures are demolished, and reviving or building them back is a huge process which will take many years. So what do you do? Let's say you go to a place like Hampi or certain places where things have been broken down. You can have infrared goggles through which you can actually revisualize and recontextualize how that place looked through a guided tour when it was there in its original form. And you can experience, this is a challenge we face because many of those ancient structures don't exist anymore. And you can revisualize them and still live them, and connect ourselves through the past, but using modern means. Mahabharata readings organized in cafes. Actually, this is being done. There is a group in Mumbai called Kasakai, where actually Mahabharata readings and tellings are organized in very chic and hip cafes where youngsters go. Average age of the people going there would be in their late teens and early 20s. So they have a cup of coffee, they are eating a sandwich, and they actually share. They are not so they do accept the fact, like they don't have experts talking about Mahabharata in the clear, very, very well defined sense that the Itihasas are, the Valmiki Ramayana, or even the Mahabharata of Ved Vyas. But many of them talk about their family, tradition of what their grandmother told them. And through these, because our first story of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana that we hear is not the show that we watched or the book that we read. It is actually grandmother tales. And they share these stories with each other over a cup of coffee. And why should that not exist? Because there are these beautiful stories in our families that we get to share with each other. And through that, we kind of continue that process. We should not break the process of family tellings, even if those family structures of joint families don't exist. Through these processes, we can keep them robust and alive. So it's very interesting, and I would exhort a lot of people to actually, if they come to Mumbai, to go and visit these tellings. It's quite interesting. Fusion music of traditional forms with modern elements to render ancient shlokas. There are people who actually do that. There is a genre of Carnatic rock. There are Carnatic rock bands who actually use traditional instruments as well, but they also mix it with guitar, and they actually produce ancient shlokas from the Vedas, Sanskrit shlokas, through modern beats as well as through traditional instruments. They do a fusion of that. So there is a very good band called Agam, which I would exhort the viewers to check out. And they have some very interesting works that they've done. I also have a friend who does this called Omar Ghazi. He uses a lot of percussion instruments, and he uses a lot of shlokas written by Shankara, to and renders them to the modern percussion beats. And it's quite interesting, actually. I also think that we need a center, and this has been repeated like a broken drum, that there has to be a private temple administration, which gives importance to decentralized theology and religious and philosophical practice, but also it helps in building a centralizing narrative and a centralizing identity as well, because in the field of temple administration and in the field of community and social action. And let me give you an example. In the case of the Shabarimala issue, right, there was a lot of response at a local level, but I felt that the larger community outside of Pathanamthitta or Kerala, the larger Sanatani community also should have been bothered by it. So let's say, for an example, uh, the Kamakhya temple. It is a temple of Shakti as a menstruating goddess, right? It's the Shakti Pitha which were formed because different body parts of Sati fell in different parts of India, and that's how the Shakti Pithas were formed. Why should a person in Kamakhya temple not have also responded to that? Because they are also part. of the shared Sanatani culture and experience. It is not just the people in that one place in Kerala, it's that larger identity as well, which is important. And in that sense, I feel while the theological and religious diversity should be decentralized and should continue in the same vein, a central identity should also be there. And there is benefits to scale because smaller temples, and I'll give you another example. A larger temple. So let's say there is a Tirupati Balaji temple in Tirupati, but there are a lot of small replica Balaji temples in different parts of India and abroad, where people probably go in hundreds or a few thousands, but they go on a regular basis. They offer something. A larger temple and smaller temples are like, for the lack of a better word, feeder temples for the larger temples. If fewer and fewer people go to those smaller replica temples of Balaji or of Ganpati, right? Then that will also reduce the footfall of the larger temple because devotionalism to Ganpati is being affected. So fewer people will then go to a Prabhadevi temple, which is the larger Ganpati Mandir. So a larger temple should have a responsibility because it has the benefit of scale. It has the benefit of more money or a higher treasury value. So it has a responsibility on maintaining smaller temples, and smaller temples, because of their interconnectedness to a larger temple. When, let's say, a priest in a temple passes away and the next generation is not there to take it forward, right? The larger temple will help kind of sustain the smaller temple because of its scale. So there is an inherent benefit in the administrative aspect. Like, for example, why can't there be one ticketing app for all temples? Right? There is a benefit to scale. That's not going to affect your spiritual practice of going to the temple, but it helps build scale. And you can kind of break this whole VIP culture that somebody will cut the line and go to, to a temple deity. Why would a temple deity show any favoritism, right? So you can have this whole VIP thing that is becoming very commercialized, where you pay higher money. Everybody goes through the same line. And you have an app, you book a particular time, and you go and visit the temple at that time. So so you can integrate modern technologies. I think there should be greater youth participation initiatives